head, slowing down and making no time. I gotta keep it rolling. Those windshield wipers snapping at the tempo, playing perfect rhythm with the song on the radio. I gotta keep it rolling.
I just went live on YouTube too, and it says that I was trying to hit live chat and it won't let me. That's kind of weird. It says this action is disabled. Well, anyway, if anybody members are watching, please try and comment if you want to. This is a special episode of Rideshare Rodeo Podcast. I know that I may have said that a few times this week because this week has had a common theme. So John often is in the comments of these lives that we do with Kim Calvin, Mike Harubi, some of these other people, Karen Anderson. He also follows them on Twitter. He's in that same space that we're all talking about those same type things. What happened in California? Why is it coming national? This, that, the other. And John is also in Chicago, which is having its own ton of issues right now. It's like, I feel like I could just throw a dart at a global map and we could talk for days on wherever it landed. And not good necessarily either. I feel like it's just it's like if you think you solved a story or you turn away, I feel like right next to it's like this other horrible nightmare. And it's just, I know that in presidential election years things always get weird. But this isn't just weird. This is the world's on the brink right now.
I hear that. Well, to everyone.
So John, welcome anyway. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from the land of Lincoln in the Chicagoland area. And Steve, it's an honor to be live with you and with your listeners, and I look forward to having a very, very invigorating discussion to end the week.
Yeah, for sure. And so, John, do you want to, before we go in, do you want to give a little background on you?
Thank you. I am a semi-retired independent contractor here in the Chicagoland suburbs, and I have, in recent years, I've been working in the policy arena. Right under. Number two is my work on independent contractors and independent contractors' rights. I also work in the mental health area here. I am a member of one of our local community mental health boards here in Chicagoland that's set up under Illinois' Community Mental Health Act. And that's a passion area for me due to the community and family members, but also the independent contractor work is another passion of mine. And that latter one I received from my father. He was a 30-year employee of the Department of Labor in the Employment and Trainings Administration most of that time. And for 6 or 7 years before that, entering that work, he'd worked for the Texas Employment Commission. So some of your listeners from Texas will relate to what that agency is. And I remember I was taking one of my relaxing walks in some open space here about a year ago, and I realized now I know why I have the passion for this. My father did this. I got this from my dad, and that's just something I have to share because it's how I got into this, and God's giftedness has given me an ability to be my own boss, to do what I would want to do for myself and for my family. And here we are talking on a Friday afternoon in January of 2024.
I know, right? So I have to, you just kind of hit something with me too, because we have a crazy mental health problem here too. And by problem, I mean it's not the people who have issues, problems. It's how the treatment of them. And I got to ask about Chicago, especially with all the migrants and everything going on. I mean, what does that even look like right now?
Well, when our local boards are set up to support the local communities. So I live out in one of what we call the collar counties. Those are the 5 counties surrounding Chicago and Cook County. So in our collar county and Kane County, our mental health board is only for a township, a 36 square mile area. So our focus is on the patients within who are residents, and that's how we levy the taxes in order to support residents who are either underinsured or uninsured in the mental health space. And mental health in this context also includes substance abuse and developmental disabilities. Now, where what you just asked comes into play, Steve, has to do with, for instance, social media. And there's
Hmm.
been multiple studies on social media and the impacts to mental health, especially to young people. And I think, the last May and June there was the Senate hearings with the Surgeon General discussing how serious and expanding this problem is. So we watch those national trends, and through our own metrics based needs assessments, we assess if that is truly something we're seeing in our local community to help our constituents receive the services and work with the local mental health, substance abuse, or developmental disabilities agencies to ensure they're receiving the funding. And if there are any impediments, either from the federal or especially the state government, we work with our local and our state officials to try to change that. Like, for instance, a year ago there was a an issue directly impacting our startup board, and working with our state senator, we had an amendment put into some sweeping reforms of the Community Mental Health Act, and it was implemented as public policy. So it's just a matter of being the boots on the ground, the ears in our community, and the eyes in our community, taking that input and giving input to the decision makers and the legislators to implement effective public policy to benefit all.
Right. So, um, what did I want to ask you about this? So, relating to that, though, I don't know if you saw in Politico that now Uber is put in $30 million in California for a super PAC.
Oh,
This was announced yesterday. It was a $30 million package that they're going to super PAC to pick the officials who represent what they want. And already, I think it's Proposition 2, maybe. It's a Governor Newsom favorite. It's mental health.
oh.
I mean, he, first of all, he should seek some, by the way, people. But I'll leave it at that on that one. But that is something he cares about, I guess. So Uber already, like in this article, it's saying they already granted $250,000 to Newsom's mental health program. I can guarantee you, if he didn't care about that, they wouldn't have given that money to that. They're really getting dirty.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Governor Newsom and the Prop 2, you called it, and
That's
I'm not.
Prop 2. Not again, guys, not 22 that affects gig workers. We're talking about Prop 2. Or I'm not even sure it's Prop 2. Let me see if I could.
Okay.
Well, no, I probably can't bring it up, but
Well, it's something that I've found here locally in Illinois and statewide, is that mental health has become very popular, which is good as far as the voters want to, with compassion, voluntarily apply taxes, their property assessments, and for a levy into the local community. Now, the mental health boards here are either at the county, the township, or the municipal level. So, like, for instance, I serve on a township mental health board. We're still
mhm.
considered a startup board because we started up. We had some legal challenges because of laws that were not completely followed by the decision makers, the elected officials, but we have to roll with the punches with that. We finally were funded at the end of 2022, and now we've begun our work as a startup board. So here in Illinois, for instance, if there's a township or a county and they see some of these issues coming through, and if there is some additional uh, unlooked for opportunities to work with our state leaders in order to bring effective policy to our respective patients in our geographies, then by far we're going to do that, and we're going to lobby for that. So, for instance, here there was a law passed in 2021 that ensured that all Illinois based medical plans also covered mental health at the start of January 2023. Now, that law has been slow to be fully embraced, and especially for providers. But I've been learning from metrics in our local community that that law appears to be taking hold, and now there are fewer uninsured patients because now their main health insurance has mental health coverage. That wasn't the case prior to 2023 in most cases, but
Hmm.
now expanding to help people who really need the help through their medical insurance.
Well, I mean, that's good. I did just look it up. Um, so here, so um, the company, this is referring to Uber, dropped 300 million into its existing state committee called the Uber Innovation Pack,
Mm,
all of it which it plans to spend on candidates and causes in 2024. So, um, one of the things to note about this is that this makes it the largest single funded state pack in this election cycle.
wow. That's a lot for a state of Cal. For one state, how much
Yeah,
was it? Did I hear that right?
30 million.
330 million. Okay. Well, it's we saw with Prop 22,
It was like
app-based companies.
208, but that involved 5 companies. This is just Uber.
Right, but what they're doing is they're using, the Citizens United precedent, and basically it's a super PAC
Yeah,
to
that's what
give
I mean. Yeah,
what's known as
exactly.
what's known as an independent expenditure. So basically, legally they cannot coordinate with campaigns, but they can
Mhm.
pay for mailings or pay for media advertisements as long as it's publicly disclosed under the California law. And we have a similar setup here in Illinois, but I don't think Uber or Lyft have done something like a $30 million super PAC. I've not heard of that here, but certainly it's happening out there, and we'll see what
Well, I think
happens.
I think part of this is that, you and I know this, that AB5 is people wanted it repealed for a long time, but now there's a big push to have it repealed. Kylie's behind it and some other people, but if that gets repealed, immediately Prop 22 is dead because it wouldn't exist because it was a carve out of AB5. There's also the questionability of the new March 11th DOL ruling and where that'll weigh in and like who will I mean, and nobody, and you know this, nobody knows. So I think it's Uber trying to get ahead of like, dude, California's our nightmare state, but it's also a state that if I mean, they threatened to go, people question if they would have. I think you and I both know they waited till the midnight hour. I'm not sure that they wouldn't have closed shop. And I know they need that state, but they were not going to bow down to that.
Mm. I tell you, with what's happening in California, and I know it was the Tuesday morning press conference where Congressman Kiley and Minority Leader Gallagher, and I think another Assemblywoman Sanchez, introduced the repeal AB5, whereas Congressman
Yeah, it
Kiley
was
was dealing with the
Sanchez I
federal.
was thinking of. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a matter of you've got, California. Right. If AB5 is repealed, I don't say it, Prop 22 just becomes moot because you'd
Well,
have
yeah,
no
I
more
mean,
carve outs.
yeah, because I mean, like in Prop 22, it says this gets you out of AB5. Well, there is no AB5. So
Exactly. But we also have something else coming up, California context, which will have repercussions across the country, and that's Olson versus California. That's the litigation that will go before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I think the oral arguments are set to start on March 18th. That was announced at the end of last year. So, however, the justices there, and this is a federal case, so they will apply across the country, if carve outs or AB5 overall, but especially the carve outs, if that's struck down, then no other state can do carve outs. Now, we know the DOL rule change
mhm,
announced earlier this month has no carve outs, and that's
sure,
because of the Fair Labor Standards Act.
right.
But yet, many of us, including those of us who hire independent contractors, and we do have independent contractor in the local mental health board where I serve. Well, the totality question comes into play. We're a startup board. We are doing this slowly and carefully and deliberatively to ensure that while our patients' needs are being met, so are the taxpayers' needs, and that we are not. I mean, some people would think that new forms of governments are going to be bloated forms of government with administration. Well, we're working very hard to ensure that the vast majority of our tax dollars go to the patients, not to overhead. But
Mhm.
yet we know once we mature, once all of our processes are documented, once we reach a level of maturity, then the independent contractor relationship is not to be meant into perpetuity. But that time is not here yet. We're
Mhm.
not there yet. And businesses are in the same boat, private sector. Many are startups. Many businesses are starting up. They outsource a variety of their tasks, including manufacturing. You have a lot of co-pack businesses. And yet these rules will begin to, if not, will not begin, they will impact these startups. These are future good paying union jobs at the right time. It's just not immediately. And we know Senator Mark Warner out of Virginia. He was one of the three centrist Democrats who held out from supporting the PRO Act in the last Congress, and he's still holding out now. The changing nature of work, and not hardly anyone is paying attention to that in Washington. I mean, Senator Warner is, and he gave an interview over 3 years, almost 3 years ago, that's still 100% valid today. The changing nature of work. More people, especially younger people, want a variety of jobs, want a variety of gigs, whether
Yeah.
it's driving Uber, whether it's being a freelance photographer, a freelance writer. I mean, my freelancing ranges from policy analytics to just straight business analytics and just straight out business consulting. That's the area where I fill a niche, and I try to apply public policy and implement a policy or suggest implementing and recommend policy that will meet the needs of one's clients, one's customers, or one's constituents.
Hey, aren't politicians who are running independent contractors?
In a sense, that's right. And they got to get signed on November 5th if they have another 2-year term or a 4-year, whichever. That's a great analogy. Look what's happened. Look at your free agents
How do
in
you
the.
politicians feel about that?
Hey, hey, bring it on there. I mean, I did the elected official, work one time a long time ago. So at my stage in life, I'm not looking to get back into elected, but certainly
Yeah.
I will just, as another podcast said, the host asked me, well, do you think we changed the world today? I just responded, no, I honestly think that we may have influenced someone else to change the world. Hopefully we'll do that here.
I hear you. So this is where gig workers, app platform based gig workers, don't move, because I'm going to play a video. And then John and we'll discuss it a little bit, and then we'll kind of play out the rest of our conversation here, because I think this is important. I ran across it. I had not seen it until 2 days ago, maybe. So I have it queued up here. Let me share it.
Is the audio coming through, or is it?
You're hearing that, right?
I'm not hearing it. I'm seeing it.
Oh, you're not hearing it. Hmm.
Are you hearing it?
Yeah, I'm hearing it.
Okay. Well, it's just to me that's okay.
Well, how could I do that? How could I play that? It should have let me, there's no reason that it
Hmm.
shouldn't be. Uh,
Oh, that
wish-
money watch verbiage there. Oh boy.
well, see,
Yeah.
and that was another thing, is that, I noticed you saying the 73 million workers, independent contractors, and I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, I've heard 75, 73, 68. So I know it's rising, but it's like everybody's all over the map on how many we really have, but it's
Well,
I don't know
that's the
why we can't.
well, that's a discernment. I mean, it depends on who is. I mean, always cite the sources. I mean, I'm quoting the MBO Analytics survey that Kim Cavan and Fight for Freelancers USA published. I mean,
Sure.
have on their websites. So that's where I got my 73 million number at. So, wow, a lot there.
Let me. I'm gonna see if it's in my history. I'm gonna just play it off my iPad,
Okay.
so we can at least hear it. We don't have to watch it. You guys were seeing
Okay.
that it was money watch. It's it's something many people watch, so it's has to be in here. You gotta be kidding me. Come on. There. Okay, yep, there it is. I just got to fast forward because I remember it's like 3 minutes of commercials. Here we go. Okay, guys. So you audio podcast listeners, don't worry, you won't even feel the pain because
when the Labor Department last studied freelance work in 2017, it estimated more than 21 million Americans made their living in the gig economy. A more recent study by freelance platform Upwork puts that number at 64 million. This growing portion of the labor force may be impacted by an expected rule change from the Labor Department. It would require companies to treat freelancers as employees rather than contractors. That legal distinction could mean more money and protection for workers, but it could also mean higher labor costs for employers. For more, let's turn to Alan Bloom. He's a partner at the international law firm Proskauer and the head of the firm's Wage and Hour Group. Alan, thanks for your time. Explain to us the differences between independent contractors and employees in the eyes of the law.
So, Jeff, thanks for having me. At its most basic level, a worker can be an employee or an independent contractor. An employee is someone who usually works for one employer. They go to work every day, they work a shift or a schedule, and they're entitled to the benefits and protections of the employment laws. So think about minimum wage, overtime pay, think about health insurance, workers' compensation, unemployment, vacation time. Those are all things that employees can be eligible for. By contrast, an independent contractor is someone who provides a specialized service to you and then goes and performs that same service for someone else. So think about a plumber or a painter or handyman who comes to your office or your home and performs a specific task for you. Think about a wedding photographer. They do the work, you pay them, then they leave, and they do it for someone else. You might see them again, you might not, but they're in business for themselves and they have a number of clients. So in today's world, that independent contractor might be an online personal trainer. It might be a rideshare driver. It might be a delivery person because, as you said, the gig economy allows you to get on your smartphone or tablet and punch up whatever service you want. The law determines whether someone's an independent contractor or an employee. And that's the point of this new rule that the Department of Labor is going to issue.
So why do they want to change the definitions?
Well, under the current rule, which came out towards the very end of the Trump administration in January 2021, the federal government focused on two factors to determine whether or not someone was an independent contractor: how much control over the work that the company does, and whether the worker has the opportunity for profit and loss. So that was a sea change from the way the law had been for decades before that. And so President Biden on the campaign trail made it a priority of his to root out what he perceived and what many workers' advocates perceived as misclassification, classifying workers as independent contractors so as to avoid having to pay them minimum wage, overtime, provide them with the benefits and protections that employees get.
If this happens, what does it mean for gig workers, freelance workers?
Well, I think what it means for freelance workers is that you're going to see a lot of litigation. It will embolden them. They will think it's a very positive development. I don't think it's going to mean that they're going to wake up the next day and be employees, because it's the courts and not the Department of Labor that ultimately will make the decision as to whether or not someone is or isn't an employee. The courts can look to what the Department of Labor says in its rules, but they don't have to follow it, particularly in a situation like we have here, where that rule has sort of flip-flopped depending on who's in the White House. So there was a rule before 2021, and now the rule is different, and now it's going to be different again.
Alan, I don't want you to get in hot water here, but in your legal estimation, what's better, the Trump rule or the Biden rule?
Well, look, I think both rules can be defended. I think at the end of the day, there are a number of workers who prefer the freedom of being independent contractors. And I don't think it's fair for any rule to try to paint them all with a broad brush. There are people that wake up in the morning and say, I'd like to do this today or not do it. I want to go into work or not. I want to work for this company and that company. And I think that freedom is important. So I think we'll have to see how this new rule plays out, but I think you'll hear arguments on both sides, and I think it'll be controversial either way.
Okay, artfully answered. Alan Bloom, thank you very much.
We'll probably spend the rest of the time unpacking just what was in that clip alone there, Steve.
Well, but if you noticed when I was tilting it up too, I was trying to do that in case I'm able to play a clip of this or whatever, even just a clip into YouTube or something video so you guys can see, because a lot of gig workers in the app-based space think this can't touch them because a couple articles have come out. I think this week alone, I've had Mike Harubi, I've had Karen Anderson, or Kim was on, Karen was in the chats. All of these people all agree, listen, nobody knows what to expect. Don't think that app-based gig workers are under any protection more than anybody else.
I hear that. I mean, it's like was explained by the attorney that was on with Kim on Tuesday.
Wilson, he was good.
Wilson, yes, he was good. I mean, but it's that whole totality of the circumstance, and that's why I started pointing out. I mean, because if in order to defend what we're trying to do in the public sector here with our mental health board. I mean, we're relatively small budget. I mean, the levy is a total of $500,000, which is taxpayer money, and we're going to stretch those dollars to reach the patients who need it. We're going to be going into our second full funded year, and over 81% or 80% going to the patients through the agencies. So, but when I see the totality, that's where I was pointing out earlier, where our totality is, we're a startup. We are not yet mature by any reasonable metric. So if that is a way we will defend ourselves, if this rule really does go into effect on March 11th, that's what we are going to do, because we value our independent contractor, but we know it's not in perpetuity. It's a startup board. You have startup businesses. And as far as the app-based drivers in the app-based space, just like Dr. Ben Chavis was sharing back during the Prop 22, these are the app-based opportunities are the entrepreneurs of today and tomorrow. And he was focusing on Black and Brown owned businesses. And by all means, who says all gig workers want or need the kind of protections that they're saying employment W-2 status is? It also brings a few other burdens with it too, including the push to be unionized. Now, that doesn't work in a right to work state, but it definitely would work in a non-right to work state. And I want to be very clear up front. I am a pro-union person. I mean, I grew up respecting the labor unions and collective bargaining, contract administration, the core mission for representation for W-2 employees who choose to work to be in work that's well represented by a union. By all means, do it. And there should be no impediments to that. And the problem,
I agree.
DC, the PRO Act especially, there are so many good reforms, and Senator Warner pointed this out 3 years ago almost. There are so many good reforms, needed reforms to the National Labor Relations Act, but yet extreme elements, particularly on the far left, they want to take this to a point where to eliminate 1099 work under their message, a false flag of misclassification. And I'm going to say this, be very clear. Real misclassification needs to be dealt with. If there is somebody who is purposely cheating a worker who should be a W-2, whatever state or federal, go get them.
Misclassification. Yeah, this goes, part of that goes into I raised this topic often with people. I said, when we get into the real, what's going to happen on March 11th or even year prior, like I tell people, listen, one of the biggest problems and reason we're getting all this legislation because you never defined the space.
Yes, and and certainly the attorney from Tuesday was very clear about that. And like I said, I think I coined the phrase to be clear. This is going to turn into the Labor Lawyers Recovery Act of 2024 because everybody's going to need a lawyer just to figure this out, let alone to apply it and obey it if it's truly applies to them. And like I say, anyone, like I said, even in the public space. And it's like a matter of when our time comes, when we go to W-2 staff, then that's our timing and that's when our totality changes. But we're not there yet. And many businesses in their startup mode, they're not there yet either.
Yeah.
So that's where our freedoms are threatened. And that's why, whether it's through Congressman Kiley and the Congressional Review Act objection, which is going to happen in the next 2 months, or another way, or through the courts. We know the co-leaders of Fight for Freelancers USA filed that complaint in the Northern District of Georgia federal court.
Yep.
One way or the other, and if my guess is there'll be a restraining order placed, and it won't even be implemented on March 11th because it's going to have to be adjudicated, just like AB 5 still being adjudicated. And
I mean, I would like it. I don't know. I would like it authenticated too, because I don't know that Julie Sue was empowered to do that.
Well, that's another front, and this appears to be a multi-pronged effort to destroy independent contracting. This is wrong. This is a matter of we have a God-given rights and our freedom to market our labor the way we want to market and to be our own boss if we can do this. And obviously we have to have a product to sell.
Yeah.
If you don't have a product, that's your loss and you need to do something about that. If either
Yeah, I mean, if you
W-2.
don't have a skill, if you haven't, look, I mean, I think everybody should. I've had W-2s, I've had salary positions, and so I also, just so you know, I wasn't able to say it much this week because it's a whole different dive. But I think salary, if all these people are really worried about people not being paid enough for their hourly work, I think salary position should be under the microscope. Because
Agreed.
I've had two, both of which I can say abused my time. One, I quit very quickly. The other one I took for 2 years and I loved it. It was learning the laser company that I now independent contractor with. And but he was honest with me up front. He said, some weeks you'll have 30 hours here. And I lived in Miami to do it for 2 years. Said some weeks you'll have 30 hours in, where you're working 4 days a week here, getting the equipment ready and all this stuff. And sometimes you'll be out of country for a month. Sorry.
But it's where contractors and the best person who can negotiate for themselves is themselves, in my opinion.
Exactly.
I mean, there are contractors who,
I'm just saying, if they really care, like, hey, you guys are too stupid to know you're being abused for your hourly services, well, then you should be looking at, like, as my first salary position for sure. Like, those people just exploited the hell out of me before I knew that kind of thing happened. I was younger. I didn't know. I just thought, I mean, the first time somebody, if you guys are in your 20s and nobody's ever done this to you before, the first time somebody offers you a salary position, it's going to appear to be, and it might be, don't get me wrong, it might be, but it's going to appear to be this golden egg that is like, wow, dude, I can step up from where I am to this.
Yeah.
But trust me, you're going to learn a lot. And it might, again, don't get me wrong, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I'm not getting my first salary position. So my first one was a nightmare and a travesty, and they abused me for it.
Well, and I guess where we all come from is that we have to be discerning as far as what are the laws and where you can impact change, whether it's at the state or the federal level. Like, for instance, when the Congressional Review Act, I want to make sure everyone knows what's going to happen because Congressman Kiley and everyone's been talking about this.
Yes.
What will happen, the mechanism that will work is what's known as a joint resolution in Congress, whether it's a House joint resolution or a Senate joint resolution. Recently, earlier this month, there was a vote on House Joint Resolution 98, which was the Congressional Review Act objection to the joint employer rule that the National Labor Relations Board is trying to implement into policy. Now, that passed the House, and I think at most 6 or 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans. Now it's off to the Senate. Now, my understanding under the Review Act, these kinds of joint resolutions cannot be filibustered. So there will be a Senate vote. And Steve, as you're aware, the Senate and labor votes have been very, very interesting over the past 2 years, from David Weil's denial to go back to the Wage and Hour Division administrator, to the fallout over the PRO Act. You still got those centrist Democrats in place. And every time I can work with local and state officials here in Illinois, I point this out. It wasn't the Republican filibuster, and it wasn't Joe Manchin that stopped the PRO Act. It was centrist Democrats. And this is interesting. This is a true story. One of the local congresswomen, I asked her, what about the PRO Act? I said, well, it's being held up. I said, by a filibuster. I said, no, that's not it. They said, well, must be Joe Manchin. No, Joe Manchin co-sponsored it. Then I went through, there's 3 senators of the Democrats, and she asked who. I said, Kirsten Sinema. Okay, people think things of Kirsten Sinema, and I can understand she was not surprised. Then I bring up Mark Kelly, and of course he's still relatively new. He hasn't really stood on his own feet. Then I say Mark Warner, and believe me, she was astonished that Mark Warner would not sign on to the PRO Act, let alone get it to the floor. And I remember sharing with her staff shortly after, this was an event in May, the 2021 clip of the Mark Warner interview, where he's very clear the changing nature of work, why he can't support the PRO Act as it was passed from the House in 2021. Our local state legislator, she even told me, the same congresswoman, like 3 or 4 months later, she still remembered that exchange because she was so surprised. So it's like, when I shared this at an independent contractors roundtable here in Illinois, hosted by our state legislator, who herself is a former independent contractor, I make it very clear, what can we do in Illinois and apply some Midwestern values and common sense to a very complex issue. And that was the meeting from one of your podcasts, I think it was early September, where Kim Cavan shared, the chairman of the Illinois House Labor and Commerce Committee, his 1099 business is real estate appraisal. And Kim had to interrupt him and saying, welcome to California. You are a misclassified employee, just like what they're trying to do to me. And I was in the room. Kim was not exaggerating. That was
when she says things, I never doubt her, because I've seen, for those of you that haven't seen, you can go find videos of Kim doing this in front of huge bodies she has no fear.
No, and like I said, calling her a Jedi Master is not an exaggeration. And she shared that with the group in Illinois. And it's just a matter of, even the chairman, he did say, I listened to the audio recording I have of that meeting, and said, this is what we're trying to avoid. Yes, we have a common frame of reference. Now let's work to implement some public policy, even if it's just codifying the common law test. Because here in Illinois, and you've heard people in congressional testimony, they'll say, well, 20 some odd states use an ABC test or some form of an ABC test. You have to emphasize some form. It's just like version control, because the ABC tests used in Illinois for, say, unemployment insurance is not the same stringent ABC test in California's AB5. And for tax status, only the construction industry under the statute applies an ABCD test. It's not even the true ABC test. but it's a matter of within different states, there are slight variances to what an ABC test really is.
Hmm.
So that's something that as we work together, I know, and you mentioned Kim and her Fight for Freelancers groups at the state levels, that's what we try to help respective state residents discern the context of what we have here in Illinois versus other states. Obviously, federal applies to everybody.
Sure. I I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think that the rule change is in place. I mean, I heard even in that little segment from a couple days ago from whatever we were listening to, CB or CNBC or Money Talk, and they're saying, if, and I hear those ifs, I'm like, what do you mean if? Like, that only happened. I mean, like, it's done. You're gonna have to you have to prove something else to stop it. It's done. Because when I asked Kim why it wouldn't just start right away, or Karen, maybe it was, told me, well, they have to do this. Maybe it was 30 or 60 days from when it happened before they can enact it. It's just, even if it's passed and it's done, they still have to do that.
They have to formally notify Congress. And the transmission, that's what Congressman Kiley pointed out earlier this week at his press conference, is that has not happened yet. What's happening now is that we're trying to, we saw once that's transmitted,
so that would have to be by, well, I was going to say February. Well, I was going to say by February 11th, because you have to do 30 days, but actually it's a leap year. So there's 29 days, but it's not a full month. So it might even have to be by like the 9th or the 10th of February would have to be.
Exactly. And that's where, but once it's implemented, then you have Congress can do its application of the Congressional Review Act, and then those votes will take place in the House and the Senate chambers, because that's going to have to happen under the Congressional Review Act. That's law. And Kim talked about something else. Cavan talked about the appropriations bill, where Congressman Kiley wants to defund the Department of Labor from enforcing the rule. Now, that's, to be clear, and it wasn't really clear on that podcast, appropriations is what runs the government. Appropriations, they're still negotiating. We're what, 4 months, 5 months, 4 months into the fiscal year, and they still haven't passed all the appropriations bills. For instance, Congressman Kiley had an amendment put into the Health and Human Services bill to prohibit mask mandates. So Kiley is going to go that route again. He's already done it once. And so he's going to do it again, this time to completely defund any enforcement of the Fair Labor Standards Act Rule 2024 rule, if it actually goes online live on March 11th. Now, that's something that can't be filibustered, and when they're compromising and negotiating, that's something they're not. If the House puts it in, I think they will. I don't think the Senate's going to be able to remove it, nor will President Biden veto it.
Sure.
So, like Kim said, it's a dead letter.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the right tweet. This is from today. I hope I can't see it in the mini version, but let me see.
Yes.
This isn't the one I meant to bring up, but okay, it's still relevant. Because I wanted to point that out to people, because I've had people asking me, hey, can't I just do the LLC? We watched it in California not work. I didn't know how it would play. I didn't, we hadn't got to S corp, like, or Lisa Rothstein is a S corp. I've had her on the podcast, and she was not protected under AB5 either. That these don't protect you people from this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a matter of the we're talking about the different cases, and obviously the co-leaders of Fight for Freelancers have their case. Another case, I think, through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, when the Biden first attempt at the Biden rule was struck down, there was a case under the East Texas First District Federal Court, and that ruling was in March of 2022, and that was the Coalition for Workforce Innovation et al. Versus Walsh, to prevent the Department of Labor from stopping the Trump rule. And they failed at that. Now, something else that was done, the Trump rule was announced in late September of 2020. We didn't know if Trump was going to win re-election or not. Well, 2 days later, Congresswoman Rosa DeLario, Senator Patty Murray, and Senator Sherrod Brown, they introduced an ABC test legislation for the Fair Labor Standards Act. I think it's the Small Business or Workforce Flexibility Act that tried to put the ABC test into the
Exactly as it is,
fairly.
because I know that in different states they have a different ABC test that if you really look, it's buried, but it's there.
It's the PRO-ACT version. It was the
Okay,
PRO-ACT
okay.
version of the ABC test. They just copy and pasted it from the
Yeah, yeah.
PRO-ACT, which had passed in that Congress. Fortunately, that went nowhere, but that was the last attempt to put an ABC test legislatively into federal law. That bill went nowhere. It was filed so late in the session, but it was 2 days after the Trump administration Labor Department announced their rule change for independent contractors, a very easy way to determine under the Fair Labor Standards Act if you're an independent contractor or not.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't believe how quick time's going here. When we do run out of time, I would really like to get you back after March 11th.
Okay.
I mean, because I'm going to do another week right around there where I have Kim back on, and I would like to bring all you guys back on because I think this was I've seen mass downloads from different people on the audio podcast that normally when I go into the analytics aren't the spots where they're coming from. So clearly title matters in audio podcasting a lot. So sometimes you bring in people who aren't following your podcast even. So I've seen some other people who are more interested in the political aspect, but I also need to balance out the podcasting. But I want to do another week because I think that, and it might be before it, who knows? But right around there, a lot of stuff. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I think that Wilson from Pacific Legal made it clear, as I would assume, and as everybody would assume, that listen, don't expect, again, this is specific to gig workers too, who think, okay, let's see. And then March 11th hits, and then March 12th, they're like, nothing changed. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. Okay, so let's say that the rule change is in effect as it says it is on March 11th. I will tell you right now, don't expect anything to change on the 11th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not going to change on the 11th. It's going to probably take months for it to seep into your life.
That's the approach I'm taking, where I am the complete client versus the independent contractor in our own independent contractor relationship in local government. That's the approach I'm taking. I mean, our agreement is in place. We did confirm through our legal team under the Illinois law, even under the context of unemployment insurance, that we are following the law. And when the Fair Labor Standards Act is officially has this rule, then we will, like you say, we'll figure that out as we go. But like I said, our totality is still the approach that I described earlier. We're still in a startup mode, and that's our totality right now. And that's what the U.S. Department of Labor apparently wants. Well, that's what it is. Now, whether they believe that or accept it, that's their call. But we are doing this in good faith to not only our constituents here in our local government, to our taxpayers, but also to our independent contractor help.
Yeah, we need to create an app that that like maybe Kim Cavan and Fight for Freelancers and all the groups could promote, where you type in your profession, you answer some questions, and it's to find out if you'll be an independent contractor under the new rule, and then it just spins a wheel.
There's some opportunity out there for an entrepreneur.
No, but where you could put the same profession twice, and one time it comes up, yep, you are, and the next time it's like, no, you're not. Like the same exact thing.
Wow.
Because as we said, it's going to be case by case.
Agreed. And it's a matter of...
and we talked about that with Wilson as well. For those of you that didn't see it, go back and watch that. There was a lot of information dropped from Wilson on Tuesday on the podcast for sure. The Why We Sued the Department of Labor is the name of the title of that podcast. And he definitely the way he described it was exactly how I envisioned it. It just made it it just sealed everything I already thought.
Agreed.
That it's going to be very confusing, but if the mechanism's in place, it definitely will. The hammer will have to drop on many fairly quickly. So like at the same time I say, like, it won't seep into your life for a while. They're going to have to drop it quickly on a few, or else nobody's going to believe it's real.
It just depends on what kind of hammer we're talking about. We're talking a sledgehammer.
Well, I mean,
or a
like some of the
velvet
case
hammer.
by case, like if they really want this thing gone, and that's the worst part of it. They're going to pick and choose. This is all about picking and choosing. Clearly, I mean, that's why why we say case by case, because as the lawyer said, the biggest problem here is you've made it unsafe to do business with people.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what this means.
And there are actually some proponents of all this that's the way they want it, which is sad. I mean, this is about freedom to work.
Well, of course they want it
There
that way.
are
Because then
people
they
who
can go, John, we don't want you doing this. Steve, we want you done. Like what?
I hear.
I mean, I feel like it's like going to be like, I don't know. There's a lot going on in this country. For those of you that haven't,
but there's hope too. There's hope.
Oh,
and as Kim was
hope.
talking about on Tuesday, and it's probably a good place to close here. I know we're getting close on time, but I guess where I'm going is that when Kim brings up where freelancers, no matter where their area of expertise is, are working together, primarily, like I said, through Facebook, it doesn't cost anything and no one's paid, but we're working together for the common goal. We could make some progress. Like I said, the Illinois Roundtable, Independent Contractor Roundtable back in August was an eye opener for many.
Mhm.
And we are going to build upon that momentum. And I know that's going to be happening in other states too, as Kim and Karen and Lisa and terrific people across the country, and Steve, you yourself in the leadership of this, we're going to put the right public policy, full discernment, full disclosure, and let's just make it everybody has the opportunity to fulfill their
You
dream.
always have in this country. Why would it change?
Exactly. Let's not get in the way of it. Let's not let government get in the way of it. So let's go get them.
Yeah. Pick your lane. Who cares? But fight it, because this isn't right. I mean, this is supposed to be, Mike and my discussion was tight. I think I don't know if I changed it, but I initially titled that one on Monday, "The End of the American Dream." And that's, I know those are strong catchwords to bring you in, but we did discuss those same words too. So it wasn't like clickbait. It's true. Like if this really were to roll out on any mass scale, it is the end of the American dream. And at that point, what are you doing?
Agreed.
Especially if you're that type of person, which we know, even though John's has 73 million pegged and this person 71, 68, we know the zone we're in. In 2021, it was in 2020, it was 59 million. So that growth is huge. We're at 40% of the American workforce is independent contractor.
But I think that what we prepare each other to do is that when we are talking to our elected officials, and this is a true story, I shared this in the Fight for Freelancers Illinois Facebook group. When I had a chance to question one of the local Congress members, I asked them, where do you stand your votes on the PRO Act? And the first thing they do is they start throwing talking points. And just like with the shield and the helmet and the sword, you know how to parry those very quickly and hold up the shield saying, get past those, get past the talking points, the platitudes, the narratives, and the bromides, get to the truth. Yeah. The truth is, through his record, and I pointed to his record, whether going back to the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or the recent years, the Advanced Premium Tax Credit, you in Congress, especially in your party, you enabled more workers to be able to have most affordable health insurance to pursue their dream of being in business for themselves. Yeah, I shared at that meeting. If it wasn't for that tax credit, I'd probably have to be a W-2 employee.
People routed out their college map to get to their own success.
Agreed.
And some people even routed their college path of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go an extra 2 years, do this, and then I'm going to go into work for a company for 2 years, and then I'm going to go off on my own. And they have that far of an outlook of a plan, and you just wrecked it for them. So, I am not about canceling college debt. I think that's BS. I think that all of us have had to work through that. That's just something that should be what it is. In fact, my thing is maybe the colleges should look at how much they're charging. That's the bigger question. But to be honest, there are people who do. There's a lot of kids who go into first year college, don't, second year. There's kids that don't need to go to college these days. Trade schools are just as good, those kind of things. But there's a lot who do by their second year have a very clear path. And so why would you go to college anymore if you can't ever go into business for yourself? Because I mean, it's not, again, we've pointed this out a few times. It's not like, I grew up in Michigan. It's not the auto era. You don't come out of college, go to work for GM and retire with them.
Yep.
You're going to have 4 to 5 W-2 careers is the average now in your lifetime. And I think it's higher than that.
And just think that's very echoing what Senator Warner said in that interview 3 years ago. It's not the 1980s anymore. And it's remarkable that Senator Warner is one of a handful of people that see that. And like I said, even in the House, I mean, Henry Cuellar, he twice voted against the PRO Act. He is the only Democrat is still serving in the House that voted against the PRO Act twice, because he knows how important independent work is, and also because that impacts right to work states, and Texas is a right to work state. That's another reason why he likely voted. But he did try to work a bill in the last Congress with Elise Stefanik concerning worker classification and possibly a self or a solopreneur legislation. So he's not just voting against the PRO Act, he's also trying to put some solutions on the table. So I know people remember the 3 senators, but don't forget, Congressman Cuellar.
Yes. So we just in the last couple minutes, tell me, and we won't even get into them, just so I have an idea for next time. What are the top 3? And it doesn't even just have to be the labor cause right now. What are the top 3 concerns in your mind right now?
Well, for me,
and I want to make it clear here on the podcast, this is January 2024.
Thank you. My priorities have not changed. Number 1 is mental health. Number 2 is independent contractors and workers' freedom. And I would say number 3 is just number 3, and this probably should be number 1 overall, is that living the example that we are taught to help others to find their opportunities to help themselves.
I like that. That's well said. We'll end with that then. So, John, thank you for joining me, and everybody, join us back here on the next week's Rideshare Rodeo podcast.
Have a great.
She was just a baby.